get started. So I'll have that it kind of introduce you all and say how you're all connected.
The story is very impactful. I'll just say this. I'm Vidette Putman. I used to work with Judge Sharp for many years as the probation officer, and then I became the chief probation officer. A lot of that was because of his, I think, conversations that he had behind closed doors regarding me, because some of the judges have talked to me about it. But I became the chief probation officer and I've retired. And so my heart now is going toward just kind of working with those that are returning back from incarceration. I'm going to have a mentoring program right now that we mentor those that are coming out of prison just to help them. We have a 10-week course. And then also doing some work for Judge Sharp now, who's an attorney, doing some of the consulting work with him. And so it's been a blessing really to be around him. He has helped. And then this story, this tremendous story regarding you and Judge Sharp, I wanted you guys, if you can, just to kind of touch base as to what your connection is and how you all know each other, and then we'll go from there.
Well, how we know each other, you know, it didn't start off well. Yeah. When I first took the bench back in 11, I think, back in 2011, this case came in. There was a conspiracy case. It was, I think, off the wheel, my first criminal case. I had never had a criminal case, and all of a sudden you get a 30-plus defendant drug conspiracy. And fortunately, Judge Wiseman, who's now deceased, took a look at that draw and went, "We can't do that to Kevin. I'm gonna take this off his plate if everybody's okay with it. Let me put it in some kind of shape and get it back to him," which he did. It was great. And he took some pleas, he made some rulings, and got this thing where the new guy could understand it and kind of move it along. But what it left was the piece that involved Chris and two other co-defendants who had decided to take their case to trial. And so by the time they went to trial, I had enough criminal trials, and I'd already had a lot of civil trials when I took the bench, but had enough criminal trials that I was comfortable with this. I didn't understand why. I didn't know the backstory, right? Because I don't know what's going on with offers, pleas, and things, but I didn't understand why they were going to trial, because the downside of a guilty plea I knew was going to be life in prison on a 3 strike, and I didn't. So I was confused, and we talked about it with my staff of what are these guys thinking? Why are we doing this? And then tried the case, and as we went through the case, you can't help but like Chris, and so you're over there kind of pulling for them, but knowing how the story's going to end. And so that was tough. And I've heard back from my courtroom deputy recently. Oh, and the court reporter on that case contacted me out of the blue yesterday, 2 days ago, and wanted to talk about this case. And she left shortly after that. And so she didn't know all of this story. She's a court reporter at the federal court in Atlanta.
Okay.
And so she just texted me and go, wait a minute, what is all of this? Because she's seen the photographs from the unveiling of the thing. And so she said, I still remember that transcript. And she kept it. She said she still has it and reads it. And so all of that was happening during the trial. You had to like Chris. You had to pull for him, but you knew how this was going to end. And it ended just like we all knew it would. And it's a gut punch, but you go, okay. But I don't know Chris in the way that I'm going to know him, sometime later when it's time to sentence. And that then becomes a life-changing event. Your question was, how do we know each other? He appeared in front of me. The short answer is he appeared in front of me in an orange jumpsuit as a guy that you immediately feel for, but it's at this distance. It's like, man, this is too bad. How did this happen? And it's not until later that I hear the story and find out how it happened and have my own life-changing event. That's how we know each other.
So, Chris, please tell us, how did you end up in front of Judge Sharp, if you don't mind sharing?
I ended up in front of Judge Sharp in his courtroom on a federal drug conspiracy because of poverty, trauma, and lack of influences and lack of opportunities.
Mm,
Grew up the youngest child of a woman who unfortunately was severely addicted to crack cocaine at the time,
mm,
and to a father I never met, never even seen a picture of him, wouldn't know him if I was walking down the street beside him.
mm.
My older brother was the best thing I had in my life at the time, but unfortunately, he's a child too. He was 3 years older than me. We lived with no electricity, no running water for nearly 2 years until we was taken from my mother and luckily adopted by a lady in the neighborhood that everybody revered and admired. But this lady is still poor herself, and she already has six other children living with her. So
Wow.
now you have nine people living in an 840 square foot house
Wow.
that's very small if a person doesn't know real estate.
Yeah.
And now we have the necessities. We have food, we have electricity, but we still don't have clothing. We still don't have shoes. So the same raggedy shoes I was wearing to school with a hole in them, I still have to wear them. The same hand-me-downs, whether they too little or too big, I still have to wear them. And at the same time, I'm starting to see the older guys that even though they're older than me, they're still my friends, they're still my peers. Now they're able to buy gold necklaces, gold watches, gold teeth, cars, rims. My brother started to sell drugs. I started to sell drugs. Unfortunately, all the trauma from our childhood mixed with all the trauma that comes with selling drugs was a burden and a weight my brother did not want to carry any longer. And January 1st, 2007, he chose to take his own life.
Mm.
And I found him.
Oh my.
And then, roughly 2.5 years later, in 2010, I made a phone call. Little did I know, his phone was tapped and they was getting ready to arrest him on a federal drug conspiracy. And they said, oh, let's figure out who this guy is and let's let him meet. We met, and as they assumed, we was making a drug deal. And I was added to his drug conspiracy, and I ended up in Judge Sharp's courtroom because not only was he assigned to the case, but as he told you, I took it to trial. And I took it to trial because I believed that what they was offering and the situation, the penalty was way too severe. And I said I wanted to exercise my constitutional right to a trial and in hopes of being found guilty of a lesser charge.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't know what to expect. I
Yeah.
haven't heard this story before. And so, first of all, just honored to be able to bear witness to your story and to have the privilege of talking to you both, but specifically, Mr. Young, because you've overcome so much. To look at you, you would never guess. I have gratitude for you and for whatever your life is today. I'm excited to hear about what you have going on. I'm very, very grateful. And I'm also grateful that those little twists and turns and micro moments where we're making decisions where you say, no, I'm going to trial, right? If you would have taken a plea deal, there, it's likely that none of this happens, right? And so, wow, I'm
It worked
just,
out. Yeah, it
yeah.
did work out. I gotta ask this question though, because in facing life and you don't know life, well, you know, life in the federal system is life. You don't get out until you die. And so
Hmm.
that didn't happen. So I want to kind of go back as to how, Mr. Young, are you sitting before us today?
So I'm sitting before you today because of resilience,
Hmm.
resolve, and redemption. The things that are sitting behind you and behind him, books.
Hmm.
Carl Sagan said books are like seeds, able to lay dormant but flower in the most unpromising soil. And I was that unpromising soil.
Hmm.
I was able to take the books in the county jail and all the pain, all the anger, and all of the energy I had inside me, I exerted them towards working out and reading and soul searching because books are just a tool. And I utilize that tool to figure out some of the answers to the questions I had and to point me in the right direction to finish traveling to find the other answers that the books couldn't answer. I was so angry and so mad and constantly asking why. Why was my life like this? Why was this going on? Why is America like this? Why is the world like this? And I'm blessed that that curiosity, that inquisitiveness was fueled by my pain.
Mm,
And then I found serenity. I
mm,
found serenity in between the pages. I found serenity
mm,
in my heart and I found serenity in my brain. My soul was able to calm down. And as you all just pointed out, I hate to use this cliche saying, but everything happens for a reason. I had to realize that I wouldn't be the man I was without all the pain. And so I started to accept it instead of resist it. And as I was accepting it and not resisting it, I knew I was finna get sentenced to a legal death sentence. Rhetorically, legally, contractually, I was supposed to stay in the Bureau of Prisons until I was pronounced deceased. And the only thing that I kept feeling and hearing in my head and in my heart and in my soul was show them.
mm,
Show them you're not a piece of trash to just be discarded and thrown away. Then I questioned myself. I was like, so how do I do that? And the only thing that I knew was you have a right. I knew I had a right to speak. I
mm,
knew that time was coming at my sentencing hearing. And so all the months leading up, roughly a year, because I
mm.
got found guilty in August 2013. And then my sentencing hearing was August 2014. And I just kept regurgitating and recalling in my memory everything I had embedded from the books, from my own perception and opinion of historical facts, scientific facts, and just kept regurgitating it, speaking to myself, and said, I'm going to show them. And August 28th, 2014 came, and Judge Sharp said the words I knew was coming, said, you have a right to speak today. Would you like to exercise that right? You don't have to. And I grabbed the reins. Little did I know that speaking for 45 minutes, close to an hour.
Wow.
Wow.
Yes, I didn't know it at that time, but those words were arrows that pierced Judge Sharp's heart.
Mm.
I do want to find out what Judge Sharp's reaction
Yes.
and your thought
Well,
process when you're listening to him.
it's now time to ask if somebody wants to speak.
Yeah.
Rarely do they do that. I mean, sometimes they'll speak, but it's short and it's all predictable. I
Oh,
know what someone's going to say. I did not know what Chris was going to say. That was unpredictable. It hadn't happened before and it hadn't happened since. And it was almost an hour of Chris speaking without notes and talking about the books that he read, talking mostly about the things he would do if he wasn't going to die in prison, things that he could do. And that was when it hit me of what a waste. What are we doing? Why are we taking someone who is an asset? Yes, he's made some mistakes, but that's not who he is. He is capable of being such an asset, not just to for himself and a family that he will have, but his community and then the larger community and then all of us. So it's like, well, wait a minute. That's not just Chris that's being thrown away. That's my asset too, because he's part of our community that adds to our humanity. This makes no sense.
Let me ask this question then. So, Chris, you eventually got out. So I guess you filed an appeal.
No, so yes, I didn't get a chance to fully answer your question.
Okay.
August 2014, I'm sentenced to two life sentences plus 5 years reign consecutive and 5 years reign concurrent.
wow.
And then I'm sent to the Bureau of Prisons. Little did I know that in March, April 2017, Judge Sharp was going to resign from the bench and speak out against mandatory minimums. And in doing so, he would speak about me and speak about the desire to help me get released. That was a life-changing moment. That was a day that is second to only my release. That day felt amazing to see these emails. So in the Bureau of Prisons, our intranet is locked in, it's confined. You are allowed to email, but only to people that they approve, and the email system is slow. It's not instantaneous like right now. It takes an hour and a half for an email to go, hour and a half for an email to come. They have to monitor it and all that. I don't have a big family. As I said, I don't even know my biological father. My brother's deceased at this time. My older cousin's deceased. A long list of friends are deceased. A long list of friends are incarcerated. And unfortunately, the women that I had in my life couldn't endure my journey. So I really didn't have too many people that emailed me, but out of routine, out of habit, you still check the email every day.
Mm.
So I'm coming in from work. I worked in the law library. I was a GED tutor and a law library clerk. So I'm coming in from the library and I check the email and I got like 6 emails. And that's unusual for me. So immediately I'm looking at the subject line and 3 of the subject lines said something that caught my attention. My appeal attorney, I had just got denied on my appeal. I had lost it, and we was working on the Supreme Court certiorari, which we knew was not going anywhere, but we were still working on it. And his subject line said, Judge Sharp is speaking about you. And then a journalist who had did an article about me previously, Taylor Dovin, she used to work for Vice News in New York. Her subject bar said, "Oh my God, Judge Sharp want to help you get free." So with him being my appeal attorney, I'm like, I'm gonna click on his first. So I click on his, and his didn't really say anything other than Judge Sharp wants to help you. I'm gonna mail you the article where he's speaking about it. So I click out of his, I click into hers, and hers had copied and pasted the whole article.
Wow.
And it was just breathtaking to see he was in the Tennessean, which is Nashville's main paper, and Nashville is the capital of Tennessee. So I'm like, okay, this is not only real, but it can get some traction, it can get me released. But that's the thing, I didn't know what was gonna happen. So after I read it, I took a deep breath. I went to my room, I got on my knees, I
Mm.
meditated, I prayed, and it hit me just like it hit me before. I understand faith without works is dead. I have to be proactive. And so I emailed Taylor back and I said, can you share this with somebody you believe will help Judge Sharp and help me? And she sent it to Brittany. Brittany K. Barnett at the time was a corporate attorney who had success with Clemency, and she won 7 clemencies under the Obama administration. Taylor knew of her and knew about it, and she emailed her and said, "Hey, if you don't mind, can you read this article? And if you think you can help this young man, would you please help him?" And Brittany read it, and Brittany agreed. Brittany not only agreed to help, immediately she contacted Judge Sharp, and she flew to Nashville, met with Judge Sharp, and they linked arms and never let go of each other and never let go until I was able to get released. In the summer of 2020, I was granted a reduction in my sentence. It went from life to 14 years. Brittany won a very rare legal argument of 2255, which is a post-conviction motion, habeas corpus motion. And she won that and got my sentence reduced. But because her, Judge Sharp, and a few other of my advocates had already been working to try to give me clemency, they had already been in contact with the White House, been in contact with other people, and pushing for my clemency, she didn't want to accept just the 14. She was like, you are, at that time, I had already been locked up 10 years. And she was like, no, we need to get you free. And January 20th, 2021, it paid off. I was able to get presidential clemency and walk out of USP Beaumont free.
Man, that's a good story.
When Brittany called me, we met in a coffee shop close to my office, and she was talking about the habeas petition. We talked about clemency, but then she goes, "I'm also working on the habeas petition." You know, I'm going through the transcript. I said, I'll go through the trial with you, because part of, for those who don't know, a lot of times what you'll get in a habeas petition is, did the judge make errors, constitutional errors that would have made a difference? And I said, look, I'll go through it. I don't think we're going to find that I made mistakes, but let's hope we do. And we actually did not. The habeas petition was granted on other grounds, but Brittany was a tiger on this thing, and she wasn't going to let go of it, and really helped keep me motivated. I wanted to get Chris out, but she was so good at what she did. It was like, I'm following this woman because she's going to be able to get this done. And she was able to get me into the White House and meet with President Trump in the Oval Office with Van Jones and Kim Kardashian, Jared and Ivanka. And we were talking about the First Step Act. And then after those discussions, the remainder of our discussion, and gosh, I think we were in the White House probably 3 hours. The remainder of the discussion was about Chris and about Matthew Charles, who was another defendant who had been in my courtroom, and I thought got a bad deal. And so we talked about clemency for both of them. Matthew was actually released as, I believe, the first person released under the First Step Act in January of 19 after it was signed in December of 18. And then the following year, Chris gets the signature on his clemency. And you know what was interesting is most of the time the White House just puts out a statement. Here's who's getting clemency, here's what they did, here's what they were convicted of, and they've been granted a pardon or a reduction in sentence or whatever it is. But that wasn't the case with Chris's. Chris's actually was a fairly lengthy description, and took part of the letter that I had signed on his behalf. It was unusual, and I think obviously his story touched those in the White House as well. And so it was one thing just to grant clemency, but it was another that I think enthusiastically granted, that they saw this was the thing to do. This is why you get executives who say, when they're looking at clemency petitions, well, look, the criminal justice system has spoken. I'm not going to involve myself in that. But yes, you are the criminal justice system. You're the last link in that system. This is your responsibility to look at it. The answer may be no, but you have a responsibility as the ultimate arbiter to look at these and decide. And I think Chris's story touched those in the White House and around the president as well, and still do to this day.
It's been very impactful, at least for me. And I'll say that because I've worked for the criminal justice system for many years, but just to hear your story has been incredible. I have a couple of questions that I want to ask you though, Chris. How old were you when you actually were convicted? And then how old were you when you got out? You said you served roughly about.
So I was arrested. I was 22. I
Okay.
was arrested at the age of 22, and I was released a couple months before turning 33. So I did 10 years and some months.
Okay.
To make the answer simple, I did 10 and a half years, but I did 10 years and a few months. So a little bit over a decade.
Okay. And then a
How
part
old
of
were
it.
you? Sorry, can were you were 23 though when I sentenced you, weren't you? Or had you turned 24 yet?
No, no, when you sentenced me, I was 26.
Oh, 26.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes. I had been in county jail for
Yeah,
4 years.
that's right.
Yeah, it
Even
took me 3 years.
that's hard.
I know.
County jail for 4 years. For those people that don't know, we can talk for 1 second about there are these certain mandatory minimums for drug cases that require, and the reason for him was because of those mandatory minimums that are in place. They're loosened a little bit. And then if you have a prior conviction, then that really takes it up to another spot as well. And so for those of you who don't know, thinking of a drug case, the person can actually get double life for that. Is that what you're saying? 2 life sentences? And then on top
Yes,
of
ma'am.
it, they add 5 years on the back of that. It's just incredible.
They wanted to kill him twice.
And then when you come back 5 years, so it's just
Right. And then you're going to do another
right,
5.
then you're gonna do
It's
another.
like, what in the world?
What
Okay,
are we
that
thinking?
shows them that shows them how tough we are on
Yeah,
crime.
really, it just shows you that mindset. But nevertheless, I want to just kind of ask you guys how, because when you got out, I think somebody was around a little bit when you were released and got off the plane. I think, did you all go to dinner or something like that after his release, Judge Sharp?
Well, so we met at the airport,
Okay.
and it was COVID time, so we're both masked up, but I did recognize him, even though he was wearing the mask. But there was a news reporter there, and Brittany was there and captured it on her phone. That moment still sticks with me. And it's funny, all those years ago that this happened, in my Facebook feed, somebody commented on that today. And so it
Oh,
popped back
wow.
up on my feed this morning.
Wow.
I took a look as we were waiting to start. I went to high school with who's just now seeing this video and commenting on it, but it still sticks with me. I love looking at those again and just remembering what that was like, to get Chris back into society and let him then make the impact for others that I knew he was capable of doing, and now he's doing it. So it's
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for believing that. Thank you for knowing that and embracing that feeling and making it possible. You helped manifest everything. And I
It
really,
wasn't hard though, right? Just during that 45 minutes, this was like, is anybody else seeing what I'm seeing? Why
Hmm.
are we here? What are we doing to this young man, to ourselves, so that we can tell people how tough we are on crime? This makes no sense. And, I saw the comments you made about books being so important. I've got books all around me. My wife has told me I've got to get rid of some that, got a couple of thousand books at the house and they're starting to take over. But, inside there, and I'm excited to read Chris's book, is this knowledge that we can all take something from and we can learn from it. Also see ourselves in there. And I think that's one of the things that's going to be so good about Chris's book. It will tell this story and we'll see how it turns out for Chris and what he did, but we'll also all, even the old white guy, I see parts of myself in the young African American male, right? And it tells you we're all in this together. I'm him, he's me. So anyway, that's what's to me so great about this story.
That's wonderful. I think part, Chris, you said something at the portrait unveiling when you said Judge Sharp saw your soul. And that was so impactful for me. I've shared that piece to a lot of people that he saw your soul. He saw you more than just a number, more than just a defendant coming before him for sentencing. I do want to find out though, Chris, and you too, Judge Sharp, what kind of work are you all doing now? I know your relationship a little bit. You guys, I could tell because Judge Sharp was a little teary-eyed when he spoke of you during the portrait unveiling, and then also with you, I can tell that you had some emotions running deep as well when you gave your speech at the portrait unveiling. Quickly, just about your relationship, you guys in contact with each other now and how that's working out and all that.
oh, yes. As we said earlier, everything happens for a reason. Even when we can't see it at that time, in retrospect, you see it. So anytime I've shared a space with him, whether it be digitally or physically, it has been life altering. Even when he had to sentence me, because he was forced to do that. It was his job. I understand that, and it was statutory. Congress had mandated that. But it still was a blessing in disguise because it gave me an opportunity to find agency. It gave me a chance to learn that I do have choices to make, and those choices lead to more situations and more circumstances. So it taught me the power of choice and the power of manifestation. Not to mention him meet me at the airport. That was
That was
surreal. That blew me away. To all the lunches, the dinners, the phone conversations, the text messages. It's sometimes I get excited and just text him about something that happened in my day. And that's beautiful that he's able to be that sounding board. And so, yes, what I'm doing today is right now I'm a senior at SMU in Dallas, and I graduate in May of 2026, right before my 38th birthday, with a degree in economics and public policy. And also, I have a book deal with Little Brown, which is a subsidiary of Hachette Book Group. And that should come out in the spring of 2026 too. So the spring of 2026, I'm looking forward to. I'm excited about. I was blessed to be able to speak at Kim Kardashian's graduation from her law program. The unveiling of his portrait is a ritual for federal judges and is something that is the apex of a long, beautiful career. For him to want me to even be there, let alone speak, and to know that this is the first time I've been back in a courtroom since he had to give me life, it was full circle. It was a
Mhm.
beautiful moment. And to know that I was a part of that moment, to know his portrait will hang in that building, hopefully, I believe it will motivate every judge that ever steps in that building. It will motivate every defendant, every marshal, every prosecutor, every probation officer. And I'm glad he was allowing me to be a part of that moment.
Well, that was the only thing that I wanted for sure was for Chris to speak, and he was the speaker. Normally, these things drag on, and you get multiple speakers and music. I go, I don't want any of that. I want Chris to have a platform. and then I will speak. But he so encapsulates my career on the bench and my practice of law, right? More than just the time that I was on the bench. And I think my place in society, that this is, I hope, a statement about how we should treat each other.
That was
My
excellent.
goodness.
You talked about how he's changed your life, Judge Sharp. I think you've given us a picture of how Chris has changed your life. The story is just incredible. I'm so excited to know it and to actually have you all on today. I don't know if Heather has any other comments or questions she'd like to make.
I was just thinking about one question. I think I want to ask the both of you, what has this experience with one another, the outcome of it, the pain and the beauty of the story, taught you about systemic oppression within the justice system and how many promising people don't get that opportunity? Have you given thought to that? And how do we take this story to, as Chris said, to inspire and motivate decision makers to do better? And I find it interesting, Judge Sharp, that you said it's easy, because most of the time you hear people say, well, it's not easy, right? But you said it's easy. And so I want to talk about what makes it easy and how do we take this amazing and beautiful this story and make it make it more common.
Well, right. The easy part, you know, the hard part is fixing it,
Yeah.
because if it were easy, they wouldn't just say, "Hey, look, criminal justice system, go lock people up for as long as you can, and that'll solve all our problems." You know what Congress wants to do, what politicians want to do, and they want to do that because their constituents want to do that. Nobody wants to think, nobody wants to
Mhm.
work on the hard problems. And Chris's story is unusual in where he ended up, but the beginning is way too common. And that's the part that nobody wants to deal with. And so as I sat on the bench, I watched the system kind of grinding up people, mostly young African American males, not all, but by and large, that was what was happening. And you went, well, wait a minute, how did we get here? Nobody wants to think about why we're here today, or this person is here in an orange jumpsuit, because that's the hard part.
Mhm.
Well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Well, no, that's not. One, what Martin Luther King said, you got to have boots. So you got to work on the hard problems. The ability to, what I found easier was to see myself in the people that appeared in front of me,
Mhm.
particularly Chris, because Chris is up there and he's talking about history and he's talking about books and he's talking about economics and monetary policy and all of these things that I found fascinating. And he learned it by reading. He didn't have the opportunity to go to an Ivy League college and have somebody spoon feed it to him. He pulled it out and dug it out himself, which was the way that I did it. Not in the same hard way that Chris had to do it, but I understood that. And
Mhm.
it gave us a connection. I saw myself in Chris. We've got to start seeing ourselves in each other, and
Yes.
and then say, okay, wait a minute. We didn't get here in a vacuum. We've got to now work on the hard social issues that create this system that chews people up, partly because we don't think of them as people. It's not us. But the hell, it's not us. It is us. So that's the hard part. And until we can do that, we're going to keep struggling.
Yeah.
And to just supplement that and elaborate, like you said, we have to see the human in each person and that interconnectedness. He spoke on it earlier. We are one. America, humanity, whatever you want to subcategorize it as, each individual is a part of the other individual. A structure, a building is only as strong as its foundation. And America, unfortunately, likes to neglect its foundation. They like to only look at the paintings on the wall, the beautiful furniture, and the people at the bottom. To hell with them. But unfortunately, that is not how society progresses. That's not how civilization progresses, and that's not how wealth is created. We have to understand the actual forces at play, which are humans producing, consuming, and each human is a part of the next human.
Very impactful.
I'm blown away. I can't wait to get your book, Chris. I can't wait. So I'll follow you to see when it's released and where, it can be purchased. And Judge Sharp, you need a book too.
Yes.
I'm working on one. It's not autobiographical. So
Okay,
we'll
okay.
see.
I mean, the whole entire conversation was amazing, and I just appreciate you acknowledging that not only did Chris have a need, but society and the community needed him.
Wow, yeah.
And I will hold on to that probably for the rest of my life.